hari ini kita akan discuss tentang mood disorder. So I said to you, ya, Tila? Ya? Ada apa nak tanya? Tak ada. Kau nak bagi tahu hujan lagi? Okay, tak apa, kalau tak clear nanti awak tanya kawan-kawan lah. And so hari ni we'll discuss about mood disorder. Cumanya as I mentioned to previous group, there's no point we go again revising diagnostic criteria, respect to epidemiology, because all of those are things that you need to know, but things that you can revise on your own. So what I do hope adalah you all semua dah baca. Dah baca belum? Pasal mood disorder, revise balik pasal mood disorder. Dah baca belum? Hello?
Dah.
Sebab apa sedih bunyi? Dah, did you get the message? Siapa namanya yang message dengan saya tadi tu? Rogayah ke? Siapa nama dia? Sarah. Sarah, did you pass on the message?
Yes,
To read
Doktor.
back lecture notes from year 4?
Dah.
Okay, alright. So the idea is all the information that you have there too, you can refresh back from the lecture notes. It doesn't change from last year, and tak ada new information on, tak ada new diagnostic criteria, tak ada new epidemiological studies. So the information that you had from introductory to psychiatry itu still valid. But what we'll do adalah kita akan discuss on management. Okay, so remember whenever you approach psychiatry cases from seminar, you have to remember that you need to look at it from 2 point of view. Number one is what are the theoretical basis that I need to know, because that theory is important for your MCQ, for your PMP, and for your discussion dalam clinical. Number two adalah how do you approach clinically if you get cases yang falls into that category lah, and that will be important for your end of blog posting and final pro later on. Okay, so remember the new approach in examination, you get equal chances to get psychiatric cases just like any other posting, medical, surgical. So jangan put lightly any posting. So every posting is fairly equal with regards to final pro examination. More so bila you buat posting tu lah. Okay, alright. Now as I mentioned, kalau you remember back the video that I mentioned, and sometimes bila you rasa overwhelmed, tak tahu nak start kat mana, paling basics adalah get to understand the diagnosis tu based on DSM first, based on diagnostic criteria first. And then from there you build your understanding from clinical perspective, macam mana nak clerk, macam mana nak tanya soalan, how to make sense of patients punya experience, later on diagnose, and then on top of that, towards the end, untuk you belajar tentang management. Alright, so the clinical parts tu we still need to go through, and nanti saya akan ajar pula macam mana nak approach psychiatric clerking, macam mana nak tanya soalan, macam mana nak interpret patients punya respon, macam mana nak make sense of apa yang patient cerita into diagnostic criteria and management, macam mana nak formulate the case. Tapi hari ini kita put aside that first. Kita akan discuss that in upcoming session. Hari ini kita discuss on management first. Kita start dengan management of depression, and then later kita come back to, and later kalau sempat kita discuss management of bipolar, manic and hypomanic and depressive phase of bipolar. And then next session nanti saya bagi case untuk you all discuss, untuk apply apa yang you all dah faham hari ini tentang management. Okay, so dia almost macam you are doing a puzzle, you dapat pieces by pieces. So maybe you tak nampak the bigger picture just yet, tapi just hanging there dulu, just get some just get some concept, start somewhere dulu. Okay, macam you nak buat puzzle kan, and you nampak macam kaki ni, you start cari mana lagi nampak macam kaki, ni nampak macam kepala ni, you join in benda-benda nampak macam kepala. sampai eventually you dapat one bigger picture. And so hari ni kita belajar pasal management, just focus on management and try to get sense of that management. And then saya akan tolong chip in lah, bantu-bantu untuk tanya-tanya so that you understand apa yang kawan you all present lah. Okay, so kita ada huge topic sebenarnya. Boleh tak you all macam just focus on apa yang essential saja. Kalau benda tu boleh dibaca kemudian, saya kata skip saja. Bila saya kata skip tu does not mean that it's not important. That means you can read up on it on your own. You don't have to have me to be there untuk guide you through. Okay, so siapa start dulu?
Me.
Mas start dulu. Okay, Mas start dengan tajuk apa?
Apa? Management of MDD.
Management apa? MDD. Okay. Alright, so start dulu. Mas start dulu.
So next slide. Okay, next slide. So I will be presenting about management of major depressive disorder. So this is the algorithm extracted from CPG, and this will be explained later. Next slide. So first and foremost, we need to do screening, but this is not done for general population, only for the high-risk individuals, which is highlighted there is the first degree relative with history of depression, chronic disease, obesity, chronic pain, impoverished home improvement, financial constraint, experiencing major life changes.
Okay, yang ni script, yang ni skip.
So,
Okay, next.
Next.
Okay.
So, this is the how to diagnose and assess the severity of the MDD. So the criteria used, the tools used is DSM-5 or ICD-10. Based on the DSM-5, a minimum of 5 symptoms is needed to diagnose MDD. Then we assess the severity of the symptom by the total number of symptoms criteria, the severity of symptoms, and the extent of functional disability. And then we can categorize it either mild, moderate, or severe. For mild, 5 or more symptoms are present, cause distress but manageable, minor impairment in social or occupational functioning. For moderate, both symptoms, presentation, and functional impairment between mild and severe. And for the severe one, is most symptoms are present and marked impairment in function. Next
Okay,
slide.
now untuk severity, okay, now bila you get a case of depression in exam ataupun in your clerking for you to present, of course the first step is for you to diagnose, and then second step is for you to manage. So severity is important untuk you decide which types of management that you want to choose. Okay, now untuk depression and bipolar, untuk diagnose severity, untuk assess severity, basically you need 3 things. Okay, ada 3 benda yang you kena tahu. Number 1 is number of symptoms. Okay, number of symptoms ni basically macam ni lah. Kalau you have bare minimum of number yang required 5, then mild. Kalau you have excess, maknanya you ada 9 criteria, patients ada all 9 criteria, then maknanya severe. So moderate somewhere in between, 6, 7, 8 macam tu. That's one criteria that we look at in order to say whether it's mild, moderate or severe. Number 2 is kita tengok degree of functional impairment. Okay, degree of functional impairment. So of course this is fairly subjective. And maksudnya contohnya bila orang tu tak bekerja ni dia ada banyak range kan. Maksudnya kena buang kerja, sampai banyak cuti, ada yang kerja separuh hari je, ada yang kerja tak siap, ada yang selalu buat salah. Maknanya everyone tu dia punya impairment tu is different. Tapi basically you can guess roughly mild ni macam things run the way it is. Maknanya very minor disruption to dia punya function. severe to very severe lah. Okay, moderate somewhere in between. Number 3 is certain psychopathology. Okay, maknanya ada certain criteria yang kalau dia ada, dia terus falls into severe. And contohnya suicidality dengan psychotic. So presence of psychosis, presence of suicidality have a significant weightage on severity. Which basically means kalau patients tu ada 5 symptoms sahaja. Okay, so based on symptoms count, it is mild. Tapi kalau dia presented with suicidality, dia ada suicidal ideation, ada suicidal attempt, so jangan classify it as mild anymore. Okay, because symptoms of suicidal tu indicate severity. Okay, now benda ni penting, and sebab dua lah. Satu, kita tanya dalam exam. Bila clinical, kita tanya, so how do you rate the severity? And how do you decide? And so bila kita tanya soalan tu dalam clinical, this is the answer that we're looking for. Okay, we want you to highlight this. We want to highlight, patients ada these symptoms. Patient ada these features to suggest how the function is affected, and so that you can justify yourself. Okay. Now, ada one more way of assessing severity. Siapa boleh tambah? Selain ini. Yang ini kita panggil clinical assessment. Apa cara lain untuk assess severity? Kita panggil objective assessment. This is something that you probably would do under investigation, psychological investigation. How do you objectively assess someone depressive state? Siapa? Apa nak jawab? Faham soalan? Tak apalah, kita discuss. Tak dapat jawab pun tak apa. Salah pun tak apa. Tak apa.
Scale of depressed.
Sorry? Scale, okay.
Scale of sadness.
Macam mana what do you mean by scale of sadness?
Maksudnya kita tanya dekat patient tu, dia punya tahap kesedihan dia, kalau 0 tu paling sedih, sangat-sangat sedih.
Okay. True, kita give them some scale in order untuk objectively identify where they are. Cuma scale yang you suggest tu is something yang very specific untuk tanya pasal mood sahaja. It doesn't help us in assessing general condition of the patient. Okay, so it is something related to scale. Apa?
That's 21.
Okay. So another way, okay, one way is clinical. The second way is by objective assessment using psychological tools. Okay, so apa contoh psychological tools yang kita boleh guna untuk assess depression? So we have DAS-21, we have BDI, Beck Depression Inventory, kita ada HADS, Hospital Anxiety Depression Scale, kita ada HAMD, Hamilton Depression Scale, HAMD. Okay, so ini 4 commonly used tools. Okay, so bila you buat assessment ni, or patients fill up the assessment tu, they akan eventually come back with results, then that give you an indication. Okay, so itu where we are in terms of assessing severity of the diagnosis. Alright, carry on.
Okay. So then we evaluate the suicide risk. So the suicide risk factors include loss of relationship, financial or occupational difficulties, poor social support, past suicide attempt, family history of suicide, alcohol abuse or dependence, other comorbidities, suicidal ideation, severity of depression, psychomotor agitation, low self-esteem, and also hopelessness. Next. So some patients might be referred or have indication for admission to the hospital. So these are the indication for referral, which is the unsure of diagnosis, attempted suicide, active suicidal ideas, failure of treatment, advice on further treatment, clinical deterioration, recurrent episode within 1 year, psychotic symptoms, inability to care for self, lack of impulse control, and being a danger to others. For admission criteria,
So kalau you nak apa yang you ada tu bagus, tapi it's too many, you might not remember. Kalau in a simpler term, macam mana how you do summarize? Bila kita dapat patient depression, macam mana kita nak decide sama ada dia perlu admission or not? Kalau you boleh summarizekan tu, what are the basis of deciding sama ada patient tu perlu admitted or not bila dia ada depression? In a simple term. What are the criteria you looking at?
severity of the
Okay, good. So number 1 is severity. Lagi?
either the patient require medication.
Kalau outpatient tak boleh bagi medication.
Oh, okay.
You tengok dekat indication yang ada tu.
Oh,
Apa lagi yang you boleh comment on? Yang
danger to others.
help us to decide.
Danger to others.
Okay, so danger to others, danger to self. Yang ni kita panggil apa?
Function.
Bukan function. Kita panggil apa ni?
Suicidal
Kita panggil-
ideation.
Suicidal ideation semua tu under ni lah, under danger to self. Kita panggil apa? Kenapa kita nak admit dia? Orang yang macam ni, orang yang nak bunuh diri, nak bunuh orang lain nak bunuh dia. Kenapa?
No self control.
Satu perkataan je. Apa?
Safety reason.
Safety, lebih kurang lah. Risk. Okay? Risk, R-I-S-K. So risk ni is a very important thing that you will see again and again, especially when we talk about psychiatric patient. Okay? Risk ada beberapa jenis. Okay, you have to understand risk. Nanti later on bila you belajar emergency psychiatry, you will remember about this again. So, number 1 is risk to self. Number 2 is risk to others. Number 3 apa? Apa? Cepat. Siapa boleh? Saya tanyalah. Cepat. Amir. Apa lagi? Risk apa yang ada? Apa risiko apa lagi yang ada?
Risk of recurrence.
Risk of recurrence tak kena mana?
Risk to the society.
Risk to others lah tu.
Tak tahu lah doktor.
Okay, yang lain? Psychiatry ni dia senang je. You just to think about it using common sense. Saya ambil satu contoh Kalau you ada patient manic patient tu manic. Bila manic ni dia ada high libido, dia ada disinhibition. Patient tu female pula, young, dia tak tidur malam, dia keluar berjalan. Okay, and so risk apa yang involved in this particular case? Patient tu dia tak nak bunuh diri, and then patient tu pun tak nak bunuh orang. Tapi in her state, in her mental state, apa risk yang involved?
Risk of other to hurt her.
Okay. So that is the third kind of risk yang also important. Risk of others to patient. Okay. Jangan ingat patient saja yang berisiko kepada orang lain. Orang lain pun boleh berisiko kepada patient. Okay. Risk of, contohnya patient tu at risk of being manipulated sexually, financially, okay, physically. Okay. So this is also form of risk. Okay. So maksudnya things that we think about in order untuk decide patient to need admission or not adalah number 1, is there any risk involved? Number two, what is the level of severity of this patient? Kalau sampai tak makan, tak minum, catatonic, psychotic, suicidal. Okay. Number three ialah facilitation of treatment. Okay. Maksudnya number three is you need to question yourself, what is the best way to treat this patient? Okay. Can this patient, can the treatment that I want to offer for this patient occur in outpatient? If yes, then probably outpatient is one of the way to go. Tapi ada certain treatment you cannot do it as outpatient. Contohnya apa? Apa contoh treatment in psychiatry yang you can only give it as inpatient?
ECT.
ECT. Okay. So maknanya kalau patients tu require ECT, then and of course there's no question about it. Tak kisah level severity dia, tak ada risk ke, ada risk ke, then you still need to admit patient. Okay. Facilitation of treatment. Okay. Number four is support. Okay. This is another thing that you need to look at. So kalau patients tu tak ada risk, lepas tu patients tu kita nak start ubat je, and tak nak start ECT pun, that means you can start the treatment as on patient. Tapi patient ni have a very poor support. Mak ayah duduk jauh, rumah dah tak ada, kena evicted from home, and so even though patient has low risk, tapi in that particular case you might want to consider admitting patient. Now benda-benda macam ni penting sebab I want you to think about your patient as a doctor. And 4 benda yang saya sebut ni, kalau you tak hafal pun referral indication yang must present ni, tapi kalau that 4 criteria tu you understand, okay, it's a basic concept yang you understand. Bila in exam kita tanya dekat you, so what do you want to do with this patient? Do you want to admit this patient or not? Then you should be able to answer. Okay? Because you've seen the patient, you know what happened to the patient. And so that's how you approach psychiatry, that's how you approach your final year postings. You need to be thinking like a doctor. Okay? Because in the exam, kita akan tengok 2 benda. Number 1, your knowledge. Number 2, your professionalism. And so what includes under professionalism adalah your ability untuk be a safe doctor, and competent and safe doctors. So you might not remember failure of treatment lah, recurrent episode within 1 year lah. So we won't penalize you if you don't remember. Tapi kalau you clerk patient tu terang-terang ada isu risiko, rumah tak ada, lepas tu kena halau kat mak ayah semua tu, tapi you fail to identify that patient is at risk and patient require inpatient because of lack of support, then it's problematic. Okay. And so bila approach psychiatry ni, dia banyak guna common sense. And so bila you belajar, you baca pun, you try to make sense of apa yang you baca. Kalau you just list macam ni, I know where you get the list from. Kalau you baca the list sahaja, you habis kelas hari ni, besok masuk anxiety pula, lusa masuk OCD punya seminar pula, lusa cerita pasal substance pula, tak ingat dah lah. Okay, alright. So next, so that is admissions criteria. Next.
So this is the phase of treatment. With generally, the principle of treatment is to relieve the symptom, to reduce the morbidity and disability, and to limit risk of self-harm and fatality. So there are 3 phases, which is the acute phase, continuation, and also the maintenance part. So in acute phase, next slide. So these are the intervention that involved in acute phase, which is pharmacotherapy, psychotherapy, and also psychosocial intervention. So the phase, so this phase, we aim to achieve remission from symptoms. Next slide. So the first one for the psychosocial intervention, we
Sekejap. Back. Okay, now macam mana you decide patient respond to treatment?
patient respond to treatment if there is a 50 at least 50% reduction of the baseline symptom.
Okay, why is it important?
To indicate that the treatment is as successful.
Betul. Okay, so you need to know about response in order for you to decide sama ada what you want to do with the treatment. So you start the treatment, you want to increase the dose, you want to switch, you want to add on, you need to decide based on patient's response. Okay. Now, apa beza remission dengan recovery?
Remission tu absence of sign and symptom. Recovery ni the individual function returns to his baseline.
Okay, now remission sebenarnya does not necessarily means dia dah tak ada symptom. It does not mean asymptomatic. Okay, remission dia start at where patients no longer meet diagnostic criteria. Okay, so it can be sama ada function dia dah improve atau number of symptom dia has reduced to subsyndrome. Okay, so subsyndrome ni maksudnya nak diagnose syndrome, for depression you need 5. So patient tinggal 1 or 2 symptom. So you can consider it as remission lah. Kita panggil dia partial remission. So it's already in remission. So kalau patient come to remission, boleh maintain to be in remission for more than 2 months, then kita dah mana patient complete the cycle of kita panggil dah masuk stage of full remission. Okay, bila maintain remission more than 1 year at least, okay, then patient masuk recovery phase. Dan cuma nak masuk recovery phase, syarat dia mesti patient attain at least baseline functioning level. So maksudnya kalau dulu bekerja, depressed, tak boleh bekerja, recovery mesti at least maintain in remission, can come back to work at least. Okay. Now, recovery ni kenapa pula kena tahu recovery? Why is it important to know whether the patient is in recovery ke, in remission ke?
So we know whether we have to stop the treatment.
Betul. Okay, so in certain patients, we can stop the treatment during recovery period. Okay, so it helps us to decide sama ada nak teruskan ubat atau tak. Okay, continue. Good, continue.
Okay. For the psychosocial intervention, it involves psychoeducation in which we deliver information on the pharmacotherapy and psychological measures that the patient gonna experience, such as the drugs that he gonna take, the side effects of the drugs. Next is counseling or non-directive supportive therapy. So this is a systematic process which gives individuals an opportunity to explore, discover, and clarify ways of living more resourcefully with a greater sense of well-being. Next is peer intervention. So this is basically just peer support and self-help groups. Next is exercise. It is a planned, structured, and repetitive body movement done to improve or maintain one or more component of physical fitness. So this is just like our daily exercise. So this outcome is for positive feedback from other people, increased sense of self-worth, diversion from the negative thoughts, increased social contact, and changes in endorphin and also monoamine concentration. Next slide. So next is relaxation, in which it helps a person attain a state of calmness. So the relaxation intervention include progressive muscle relaxation, relaxation imagery, and also autogenic training. Next is psycho-spiritual intervention, in which it emphasizes on religion aspect. Because religion is a system of beliefs and practice related to the sacred or divine as held by a community or social group. this is a teaching of spiritual religious principle, client prayer, reading sacred text, and religious imagery or spiritual meditation.
Okay, so the psychological intervention tu tak apa. We go through superficially just for today. Nanti masa psychotherapy punya seminar nanti we'll go in a deeper, we go deeper lah, insyaAllah. Okay, carry on.
So next is psychotherapy. The
Okay,
first
so
one
yang
is,
ini nanti kita akan go through in detail masa psychotherapy punya seminar.
so next.
Okay, so we'll focus on pharmacotherapy so that kita boleh relate dengan management of depression.
So there is pharmacotherapy to achieve symptoms remission between 8 to 12 weeks. So in mild to moderate MDD, patient should be offered psychosocial or psychological intervention. So the patient may start antidepressant in the case of past history of moderate to severe depression, patient's preference, previous response to antidepressant, lack of response to pharmacotherapy intervention. Next slide. So for
Okay, kejap back. Now, untuk newer guideline, and sebenarnya we can still offer pharmacological intervention even for mild to moderate. Okay, kalau you refer old CPG, memang dia akan highlight kita just bagi sebenarnya moderate to severe kita dah start treatment. Tapi newer CPG dia tunjuk even with mild depression kita boleh start pharmacological treatment, and one of the reason adalah scientifically it shows that most mild depression ni akan end up jadi moderate and severe juga kalau kita tak treated. And number two is because of lack of access to psychological intervention. So most patient betul lah kita boleh bagi CBT and what not, tapi in real life, in clinical setting, berapa kerat je yang kita boleh bagi full psychological intervention. And kalau you tengok contoh dekat Kuantan tak ada psychologist. Dekat UIA ada one on leave and then need to cover semua patients dekat Pahang Barat ni. And so in real life, kita still treat patient with mild depression with pharmacotherapy as long as it's indicated and patient tolerate. So in exam jangan kata kalau severe baru start pharmacotherapy pula. And so as long as dia diagnosable, then you boleh treat.
Next slide. So for moderate to severe, the intervention include pharmacotherapy and psychotherapy, and also exercise as an adjunct treatment. Next slide. So, so the choice of antidepressant depends on these factors, which are the efficacy and tolerability of the drugs, patient profile, the comorbidities, concomitant medications to avoid drug interactions, cost and availability, and also the patient's preference. Next slide.
Okay, so kalau nak ingat mudah, saya selalu ajar remember steps. Okay, steps. STEPS. Okay, so S is symptom profile. Okay, so symptom profile ni boleh bagi example macam mana symptom profile help us to decide medication. Mas.
Symptom
macam mana symptoms profile, mana symptoms apa yang patient ada tu, decide apa jenis medication yang kita nak bagi kepada patient.
Kalau macam dia overlapping with psychosis, macam schizoaffective disorder, we gave psychotic medication also. Tengok.
Suka pula dia. Okay, so bolehlah. Contohnya patient tu ada psychotic symptom dan kita bagi antipsychotic. Okay, betul lah tu. Tapi saya bercakap tentang depression. So kalau depression, yang lain siapa yang boleh bagi example macam mana kita decide medication based on symptom profile? Ataupun you boleh jawab in a general term je. Saya pun tak expect you all boleh sebut specific medication. Tapi in general term, macam mana you decide?
Kalau
Okay,
orang
okay.
tu mood disorder, kita bagi antidepressant. Kalau psikotik, bagi mood stabilizer.
Kan, betul lah tu. Tapi ni go specific. Now that we know patient ni ada depression, macam mana symptoms profile of dia punya depression? Depression ni dia banyak kriteria. Okay, dan bukan semua orang ada similar presentation. Okay, even each depression tu dia ada different specifier. So how do we decide medication apa yang sesuai dengan patient based on symptom apa yang patient ada?
Doktor ke yang kalau macam patient ada masalah nak tidur, so kita boleh bagi ubat tidur.
Okay. So that's one example. So one example is bila patient ada depression, one of the punya problem adalah sleep disturbance. Okay. Now sleep disturbance does not mean patient tak boleh tidur. It may means patient terlalu banyak tidur atau tak boleh tidur langsung atau tidur interrupted atau difficult to start sleep ataupun bangun awal. Alright. So each medication ada different characteristic with regards to this effect. Okay. So ada medication, ada antidepressant yang sedative. So therefore, bila patient tu ada depression, at the same time ada susah nak tidur, then you might choose antidepressant yang sedative. Sebab the side effect profile tu suits dengan ubat yang you nak bagi. Tapi kalau patient ni terlalu banyak tidur, dia ada hypersomnia. Okay, apa specifier bila patient ada depression with hypersomnia, apa specifier dia? Kita panggil apa?
Atypical.
Atypical. Okay, good. So bila patient ada atypical depression, so we don't go with antidepressant yang sedative. Sebab apa? Sebab you just make things worse. Okay, sebab tu kita ada options of antidepressant. Alright, that's what I mean by symptoms profile. Another example, what would be the manifestation of patient with depression with anxious distress? Dia manifest macam mana? Macam mana dia punya presentation?
Fearful.
Dia apa?
Fearful. Dia takut.
Dia fearful. Okay. Lagi?
Unable to sleep.
Dia akan presented with agitation. Okay, with anxiety-like symptoms. Betul lah tadi, worries, fearful, restless, cannot sit still. Okay, so with this patient, so you don't want to give them antidepressant yang alerting macam SNRI, macam fluoxetine. Okay, sebab patient akan jadi even more restless. So you might want to give something yang more long acting macam fluvoxamine. You maybe want to add on benzodiazepine to control the symptoms. So this is what I meant by number one, we look at symptoms profile. Number two, T. Okay, siapa boleh agak-agak? T ni apa maksudnya? Najia, senyum-senyum tu apa? T tu apa maksud dia?
Time ke?
Apa?
Time. Tak tahu.
Time? Apa benda?
Time,
Time maksudnya apa? Macam mana time decide pasal medication?
Tak sure.
Tak. Oh, you just bagi random perkataan yang start dengan huruf T je lah. Kita bukan main game teka perkataan ni. Bila you fikir pasal ubat, T, apa yang you boleh kaitkan? Nak decide ubat apa nak bagi patient ni, you kena tengok dia punya T dia. Apa T tu?
Tolerable.
Is it
Pandai. So tolerability. Okay, tolerability. And so contoh patients tu ada depression, at the same time dia ada gastroesophageal reflux contohnya, and dia ada GERD. Okay, so certain SSRI dia ada strong GI symptoms to start with. The patient cannot tolerate, then you cannot choose that kind of medication. Alright, and then E ni apa?
Efficacy.
Efficacy, good. And so E is efficacy. So you look back at guideline, apa first line, apa second line. So you'll be based by that. P, apa P? P apa P? Siapa boleh teka? Nak start ubat kena tengok P.
Preference.
Good. Patient's preference. Okay, so certain medication, for example, ada patient tak boleh telan tablet, ada patient tak boleh ambil kapsul, ada patient tak suka ubat yang mengantuk, ada patient tak suka ubat yang kena makan siang. So whatever preference yang patient ada also plays a role in deciding what medication you want to give patients. Alright, last kali S. Apa S?
Side effect.
Good. Side effects profile. Okay, so contoh you ada medication yang dangerous to heart. Patients ada cardiac history, then you want to avoid that medication. Patients ni ada erectile dysfunction, for example, to begin with, sebab dia ada diabetes mellitus. So you want to avoid medication yang akan give even more side effects, sexual side effects to the patient. So these are the things that you need to be aware of. Okay, so now at this stage you might not remember all medications yang ada, tapi remember you are expected to know at least class of medication, example of medication, common side effects. At least one or two for each class. SSRI bagi 1-2 example, SNRI 1-2 example, NASA 1-2 example. You are expected untuk year 5 punya level. Okay, so tak ingat sekarang tak apa, tapi build up by week 4-5 tu sepatutnya dia dah mengalir macam air. Psychiatry ni dia senang je with regards to ubat. You ada antidepressant, antipsychotic, mood stabilizer, benzodiazepine, tu je yang main. 4 je main. Yang lain-lain tu rarely used tu you tak perlu ingat. So for age tu ada 2-3 kategori sahaja. So you have to by right expected to remember. Okay, sambung.
So these are the choice of drugs that can be used. So the first one is SSRI, which includes sertraline, fluoxetine, escitalopram, citalopram, paroxetine, fluvoxamine. Next is SNRI, which is serotonin noradrenaline reuptake inhibitors, such as venlafaxine and duloxetine. Next is noradrenergic and specific serotonergic antidepressant, which is mirtazapine. Next, melatonergic agonist and serotonergic antagonist, which is agomelatine. Next, multimodal serotonin modulator, vortioxetine. Next is tricyclic antidepressant, amitriptyline, clomipramine, doxycycline, imipramine, and etc. Next is monoamine oxidase inhibitor, such as phenelzine and moclobemide. Then we add this is benzodiazepine is adjunct treatment to the primary drugs. That for example.
Okay. Alright. So these are examples of medication. Okay. So saya cadangkan first start dulu memorize groups dia dulu, SSRI, SNRI, NASA. Basically difference dia adalah apa yang membezakan semua ni?
Symptom.
Kan?
Mechanism
apa
of action.
Mechanism of action. Okay. So kalau SSRI dia target serotonin saja. SNRI dia target serotonin as well as noradrenergic. Kalau NASA dia target more on noradrenergic, less on serotonin. Melatonergic dia target more on melatonin, and which is sleep inducing hormone. Kalau multimodal ni maknanya semua benda dia target. Tricyclic, monoamine ni all type of medication. So remember groups dia dulu. Lepas tu for each group you remember 1-2 example of ubat. And then third, dah hafal tu, hafal pula dia punya common side effects. Lepas tu hafal pula dia punya recommended dose. So sikit-sikit, after few times you ulang, insyaAllah you will be able to remember. Cara dia ikut you lah, you nak hafal, you nak tasmid bawah pokok petang-petang ke, you nak rebus buat air ke, it doesn't matter as long as eventually you find ways to remember it. Hujan dah dekat Kuantan. Okay? Carry on.
Dah saya. Pak saya dah.
Habis dah?
So belum
Sarah
nak
sambung.
sambung continuation. Okay, so I proceed with the next phase, which is continuation and maintenance phase. Can you hear me? Okay. So for continuation and maintenance phase, the aim are to prevent relapse, recurrence, and development of chronicity in patients with a major depressive disorder. And the treatment choices that we can have is either pharmacotherapy with psychosocial intervention and or psychotherapy with psychosocial intervention. So for psychosocial intervention and psychotherapy, the data has shown that cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, and also interpersonal therapy are effective in reducing the risk of relapse and recurrence in the patient with MDD. For pharmacotherapy, in maintenance and continuation phase, the antidepressant that we give should be continued for at least 6 to 9 months after remission, and at least up to 2 years if there is a high risk of relapse or recurrence. So, the risk of relapse and recurrence of MDD includes there is frequent and recurrent episodes, severe episodes such as patient has psychosis, severe impairment and suicidality attempt, chronic episodes, presence of comorbid psychiatric or other medical conditions, presence of residual symptoms, and also difficult to treat episodes. Meanwhile, for patient who has major depressive disorder with psychosis, the choices of treatment include pharmacotherapy with psychosocial intervention and with or without electroconvulsive therapy. However, for patient with psychosis, the pharmacotherapy, we need to give combination treatment of antipsychotic and antidepressant because it has been proven that the patient will have a better response than monotherapy of antidepressant alone or antipsychotic alone. So for electroconvulsive therapy, other than is indicated in patient with psychosis, it is also indicated in patient with acute suicidal ideation, high degree of symptom severity and functional impairment, catatonic features, rapidly deteriorating physical status, repeated medication intolerance, previous favorable response to electroconvulsive therapy, pregnancy, for any of the above indication, and also up to patient's preference. So, however, there is some patient that can have a failed response to initial treatment that we give. Some of the factors that can cause this failure include if we give incorrect diagnosis, patient with psychotic depression, patient who have organic conditions such as hypothyroidism, patient who has other comorbid psychiatric disorders such as substance abuse, and also patient who does not compliant to the treatment. And there are some strategies that can be used to as a strategy to give better response. First is optimization, where we can
dengar ke hujan dekat rumah saya?
Hujan kat rumah saya, Doktor.
Saya pun hujan juga ni. Tak takut mengganggu je. Carry on.
Okay, so for optimization, we can increase the dose to standard maximum dose for 6 to 12 weeks. And the second one is we can switch one antidepressant to another. The next one is combination. We add another antidepressant to the initial treatment. And also the last one is augmentation, whereby we will add non-antidepressant to the initial treatment. For example, lithium or thyroid hormone. Okay, so for prognosis,
Alright, back. So this is also a common clinical scenarios that sometimes we ask, especially in exam. You get patient with depression, and then masa sampai part management tu kita akan create a scenario untuk tengok whether you understand or not pasal management of depression. So for example, Sarah, you are the patient, you have patients yang you diagnosed with depression, you already started patient on SSRI, sertraline, 50 mg. Tapi after 1 month, patient came back to clinic, still feeling depressed, still feeling suicidal, still have trouble sleeping, cannot continue working. So what would be your approach?
so for my approach, I will try to optimize the dose of SNRIs to the standard maximum dose first, rather than switching, combine or augmentation
Okay,
to the initial
before
treatment.
that, apa yang ada dekat sebelah kiri slide you tu?
Or factors. So we need to know
Okay.
the factors.
So what do you need to do first?
History taking that.
Okay, what do you want to find out?
I want to find out whether the patient is compliant to his medication.
Okay, before complying with medication, apa yang lebih fundamental?
If our diagnosis is correct.
Macam mana?
We need to know if our
betul.
diagnosis
Okay.
is correct.
And so remember, and kalau you start patient on treatment tapi patient tak respond to that treatment, so you need to think about, am I treating the right thing? Okay, you might end up with the answer is yes, this is still depression, and tapi by having that question, it helps you to guide what you want to do, because there's no point in changing medication, switching, augmenting, while at the end of the day sebenarnya you treat a different things. Okay, so maybe contohnya patient tu bukan ada depression, dia ada personality disorder sahaja, for example, ataupun dia ada you think it's a depression, sebenarnya it's a bipolar depression. So kalau you tak properly review your diagnosis, you might end up struggling dengan real dengan correct management. So review the diagnosis lagi, and then review comorbidity. Lepas tu kita nak review dia punya compliance. Okay, so kalau semua tu dah settle, maknanya betul we are treating depression, patient dah comply, tapi patient still tak improve. Then what you want to do?
Optimize the dose.
Optimize the dose. Okay. So what helps you determine that you want to optimize the medication? Kenapa you tak pilih switching? Kenapa you tak pilih combination? Kenapa you tak pilih augmentation? Kenapa you nak go for optimization?
Because different individual has different dose effect. So we need to optimize the dose first.
So, jawapan dia adalah you can only optimize sekiranya number one, there is still room for you to optimize further the medication. Okay, so dekat sangat saya. So kalau patient tu already on maximum dose, tak payah cerita pasal optimization lagi lah, kan? Sebab you nak optimize macam mana lagi? And contohnya, jap. Sekejap, saya nak pakai earphone. Okay. Cuba cakap, Sarah.
Hello.
Buat sikit.
Teh.
Cuba. Baca Al-Baqarah ayat 26. Tak apa. Dengar dah. Okay. So, number one is, boleh dengar saya?
Boleh.
Boleh. Number one is, cabut dah. Number one is, ganas sangat pakai earphone sampai cabut. Number one is that if there's still room untuk optimize the dose. Number two, if patient still can tolerate. Okay. So kalau lah patient tu on 100 mg of sertraline. Now, dose of sertraline can go up to, sertraline ni SSRI dose of sertraline can go up to 200. Patient baru 100. So of course you're thinking about, oh, I need to optimize the medication. Tapi with 100, patient becomes sedated. Tak boleh bangun pagi, pukul 10 baru pagi. Then you shouldn't go for optimization. And so you might need one to consider switching. Okay. Masa bila you nak consider combination? Kalau you're running out of option for switching. You have switched patient to all available medication. And then you might want to consider combination. Alright. Augmentation is when you running out of options for you to combine. And mana dah combine ni tak jadi, you augment dia dengan medication. Apa beza combination dengan augmentation? Combination, you combine ubat yang memang indicated for that diagnosis. Okay? Contohnya, patients ada depression, you treat SSRI campur SNRI. So dua-dua indicated. So you combine. Augmentation is when you treat patient dengan ubat yang bukan primarily used to treat that diagnosis. Contoh, you bagi patient sertraline, you campur dengan antipsychotic. You augment dengan antipsychotic. So sertraline is SSRI, SSRI is first line, antipsychotic bukan first line. So you augment. Ataupun in some cases kita bagi patient tyrosine, okay, thyroid hormone. So Lezapro, escitalopram, SSRI combine dengan tyrosine. And so itu contoh augmentation. Okay, faham So yang ni biasa kita discuss bila kita discuss about treatment resistant depression. Mana depression yang difficult to treat. Okay, carry on.
Okay, so for prognosis of MDD tends to be chronic and patients tend to relapse. So 25% of patients actually experience recurrence of MDD in the first 6 months, 30 to 50% in the following 2 years, and 50 to 70% in 5 years. There's good and poor prognostic indicators for MDD. For good prognostic indicators include patient has only mild episodes, absence of psychotic symptoms, short hospital stay, and good psychosocial indicators such as history of solid friendship during adolescence, stable family functioning, and good social functioning, absence of comorbid psychiatric disorder and of a personality disorder, no more than 1 previous hospitalization for MDD, and also advanced age of onset. For poor prognostic indicator, when patient has a coexisting dysthymic disorder, abuse of alcohol and other substances, anxiety disorder symptoms, history of more than 1 previous depressive episodes, and men has a poorer prognosis than women. So, proceed with dysthymia.
Okay, sambung.
So, proceed with dysthymia. To recap, dysthymic disorder is characterized by at least 2 years of depressed mood that is not sufficiently severe
In DSM-5 kita panggil apa dysthymia?
Persistent depressive disorder.
So persistent depressive disorder. So you don't have to go through dia punya dia punya diagnostic criteria semua tu, balik baca. So kalau dysthymia pula kita manage macam mana?
So for treatment of dysthymia, we usually combine pharmacotherapy and psychotherapy because it is the most effective for the disorder. For psychotherapy, we can opt for cognitive behavioral therapy, interpersonal therapy, insight-oriented therapy, and behavior therapy, and also family and group therapy. For pharmacotherapy, we can use either SSRIs, drug from SSRIs group, venlafaxine, and also bupropion because it said that these 3 drugs is the most effective for patients with dysthymia. Okay. So for prognosis, about 20% progress to major depressive disorder MDD, 15% can progress to bipolar 2 disorder, and less than 5% can progress to bipolar 1 disorder, and almost about 25% of all patients never attain a complete recovery. However, with treatment, the prognosis is good. Okay, so this is I include
Yang ni sama aja macam tadi, cuma yang this table is good because dia ada common side effects. Okay, dengan dosing. Okay, so Kalau you tengok sekali ni, you akan rasa overwhelmed, banyak je benda nak kena ingat. Start sikit-sikit dulu. And kebanyakannya tu dia repetitive lah. Dia benda yang sama je. Okay, dia ada common features. And contohnya common SSRI ni, GI upset, somnolence, sedation, sexual side effects. And so ingat 2-3 benda tu pun dah cukup dah. Okay.
Okay. So Divan, you just repeat. Revise later. Setuju.
Okay. Alright. It's already 4. I think kita stop dekat sini. Let management of depression to sink in. Dan apa yang saya ajar earlier dalam video tu you absorb. Kita ada you all ada kelas dengan saya this week, hari Jumaat kan? Okay, now siapa present psychotherapy?
Grup 3.
Ikhlas.
Ya.
Awak lah yang message saya, patutlah saya macam pernah keluar. Kan awak message saya pasal psikoterapi kan?
Tak.
Bukan.
Saya.
Siapa yang message saya pasal psikoterapi? Oh bukan, Fadila.
Saya.
Fadila, kenapa awak duduk dalam gelap? Okay. Fadila.
Hujan.
Okay. So kita buat macam ni ya. Untuk hari Jumaat ni, yang lagi 2 orang tadi tu siapa? Siapa yang sepatutnya present bipolar? Natasha dengan Fatihah. Okay, so Natasha dan Fatihah akan completekan bipolar punya management hari Jumaat pagi. Selepas tu, kita akan discuss case. Okay. So saya akan bagi PMP mood disorder. So semua orang kena jawab. Open book pun tak apalah. So kena jawab. And then kita akan discuss on Friday. So maksudnya Friday ni kita summarizekan all that we've learned, depression and bipolar dalam PMP punya discussion, which basically means the psychotherapy tu kita akan shift ke 25 hari bulan seminar disosiatif. Okay, so siapa yang sepatutnya present seminar disosiatif tu, dia beruntung. Sebabnya selalunya dissociative disorder, tugasannya tengok saya punya video sahaja. So 25 hari bulan psikoterapi, 20 hari bulan kita sambung management of depression, management of mood disorder. Lepas tu ada satu lagi video yang saya nak you all tengok. Nanti saya bagi link dekat group saya. Nanti Hilmi tolong distribute dekat your friends. Okay? Alright. So for now, untuk video yang saya share tadi, introduction dengan mood disorder, any question? Ada apa-apa nak tanya?
Doktor,
Yes.
untuk yang response to treatment tu, kan kita cakap 50% reduction of symptoms. Apa maksudnya tu? Kalau
Bagus. Sebab ada orang tanya, saya lupa nak cerita tadi. So 50%, you can assess 2 cara. Cara yang pertama, clinically, which basically means bermaksud bila patient dah ada 50% reduction in symptom. Kan diagnostic criteria kan dia ada numbers of symptom kan? Okay, so kalau patient start with 8 symptom, after 2 weeks tinggal 4 symptoms, then that's basically means 50% reduction. Second way adalah dengan menggunakan
Objective assessment.
objective assessment. Good. So contohnya bila you buat objective assessment, DAS for example. So DAS dia ada scoring dia. And so whatever score tu, contoh dia ada 30. So after 2 weeks dia tinggal 15. So that's 50% reduction. Okay, that's how you know.
Okay,
Selalunya kita generally speaking kita wait for 2 weeks lah untuk kita decide. Okay, lagi?
Doktor, contoh kalau macam awal-awal tu kita tak buat yang objektif punya assessment. Kiranya untuk yang kita nak tengok dia respond to the treatment tu boleh guna
So kena guna clinical lah kalau you tak ada something to compare. And sebab tu bila kita memang generally clinically tak ramai orang buat, tapi sepatutnya ideally bila you present investigation kan, biopsychosocial, so you kena highlight lah psychological investigation you nak buat objective assessment. Sebab apa? Why? Because so that you can compare dia punya respon. Okay. And so bila kita buat from the beginning, senanglah kita nak compare. Kalau tak buat, susah lah. Tapi that doesn't stop because you still have option of apa kita panggil clinical assessment. Okay, lagi? Ada apa-apa nak tanya lagi?
Doktor, contoh kalau fail response to initial treatment tadi, contoh dah switching sampai dah tak ada choice, dah semua tak boleh. Yang combination tu guna drug, guna medication yang awal-awal campur dengan yang lain ke macam mana?
So combination basically kita combine different class. So you cannot combine class yang sama. Contohnya patient tu kita start dengan SSRI, dia tak fully respond. Okay lah sikit-sikit tapi still ada some symptom. So you ada option sama ada you nak switch dia to other medication atau you nak combine dengan NASA for example. And so NASA ni dia sedative. And patient pun tidur tak okay lagi. So you boleh combine lah. So sertraline campur mirtazapine. Tak apa, don't worry. Level nak combine apa dengan apa ni bukan your level. Not your level. Maksudnya bukan undergraduate punya level lah. Tapi you punya level adalah you know that it's an option. Switching, augmentation ni is an option. Okay. And yang more important in your level ni, you tahu framework of assessment. Macam mana nak treat mild, treat macam ni. Kita ada biopsychosocial options, kita combine psychological dengan ni. Kalau tak works, kita treat. So maksudnya for undergraduate level, tak kisahlah medicine, orthopedic, ONG, what we expect from you sebenarnya adalah konsep. And sebab tu you all kena faham framework, konsep and apa groups yang ada. So jangan hafal buta-buta. You kena tahu apa principles behind it. And a lot of principles ni, especially in psychiatry, I cannot speak for other specialty. In psychiatry ni, a lot of it tu is common sense. Contohnya, kenapa patient yang ada MDD with psychosis you nak bagi antipsychotic? You tak payah scratch your head, you boleh fikir. Of course you want to bagi antipsychotic. Sebab apa? Sebab patient ada psychotic symptom. Okay. Patients ada agitation, for example. So you nak bagi apa? You nak bagi antidepressant dengan apa? Patient depressed and then agitated. Agitated nak bunuh diri, agitated nak self harm. You nak bagi apa? Antidepressant
Benzodiazepine.
You nak bagi benzodiazepine. Okay. And then lecturer tanya, which benzodiazepine you want to give? Tak tahu. Okay. Apa different types of antidepressant? So when we talk about antidepressant, kita ada short acting, long acting, intermediate acting. Okay. You need to remember at least one or two examples for each. So short acting ni contohnya alprazolam. Intermediate acting, lorazepam, clonazepam. Long acting, diazepam. Okay. So how do you decide which benzodiazepine you nak bagi? Macam ni you decide nak bagi alprazolam ke, nak bagi diazepam, nak bagi yang short ke, nak bagi long acting.
Severity?
Not quite. Nak bagi based on apa? But cuba fikir common sense. Kenapa? Why is the short acting, long acting semua tu is there? Why?
Tengok dia punya simptom tu recurring.
Apa?
Maksudnya macam tanya dia punya agitation tu kerap datang ke tak. Kalau macam jarang-jarang datang, kita bagi yang short acting. Tapi kalau dia selalu datang, kita bagi yang long acting.
Okay. So Farisha jawab tu sebenarnya based on common sense je. Bukan you pernah baca pun pasal ni, betul tak? Kau you pernah baca pasal benzodiazepine in depression? Tak kan? Sebab tu saya kata ini senang je. You have just think about it. Make a sense out of apa yang kita nak you jawab tu. So benzodiazepine is a symptomatic control medication. Dia bukan nak treat depression, dia nak treat symptom. So if you want to add benzodiazepine to your treatment regime, then you need to know simptom apa yang you nak target. So bila you tahu simptom apa you nak target, you look at the nature of that symptom. Contoh, you nak target sleep problem. You nak bagi benzodiazepine untuk sleep. Okay? Now, kalau patient ni ada problem to initiate sleep, yang mana yang bagus? Short acting, long acting, intermediate acting?
Short
acting lah kan. You just want to start je. Once dia dah tidur, dia tidur sampai ke sudah, tak ada masalah. Tapi ada patient, dia ada problem interrupted sleep. Tidur susah, and then bangun balik 2-3 pagi, pukul 4 bangun lagi, pukul 6 bangun lagi. So which one would be useful?
long acting.
Long
Intermediate
acting.
or
So
long acting.
you want something yang sustain throughout the night. Ataupun mungkin kalau tak nak lama sangat, you give them intermediate. Okay, you bagi them lorazepam yang boleh last for 6 hours. Alright. So sama juga, you bagi you bagi untuk agitation. So ada agitation yang comes in bouts, macam panic attacks for example. Ada agitation yang memang throughout the day patient tu agitated. So it's different symptoms profile. Kenapa? What is the other reason for adding on benzodiazepine in treatment of depression? Apa other reason other than agitation? Apa lagi other reason? Sleep, tadi kita sebut sleep. Okay, sleep, agitation lagi. Ada satu lagi, bila patient tu presented with irritability. Kalau patient with depression presented with irritability, apa kita panggil? Apa specifier yang likely?
With
Irritability
MDD
ni bukan
with
depression pun. Bukan. Irritability ni bukan, boleh juga tapi not, other than anxious distress. Irritability ni bukan depression punya simptom, tapi ada patient yang depression dia presented with irritability. Apa contoh dia?
PTSD.
Bukan, MDD specifier apa?
Mania.
Sorry? Manic. Apa? So irritability ni symptom mania. Tapi patient tu presented with depression tapi dia ada irritability. So apa kita panggil tu?
With mixed features.
Pandai. So with mixed features. So certain patient ada mixed features. So kita bagi dia we can also add on benzodiazepine. Kenapa kita generally add on benzodiazepine untuk patients yang ada depression? Kenapa kita tak just tunggu je dia punya antidepressant to works? Sebab apa? So how long does it takes untuk antidepressant works?
Few weeks.
2 weeks. Okay, so generally speaking 2 weeks. Kenapa 2 weeks? Siapa yang pernah baca? Siapa yang ada idea? Mungkin ingat dulu ke lecturer pernah cerita ke. What does it takes 2 weeks? Ni semua soalan-soalan distinction dah ni. Kalau dah settle soalan lain, kita tanya soalan susah sikit. What does it takes 2 weeks untuk antidepressant to work? Kenapa dia tak works immediately?
Degradation of
Kenapa kita bagi serotonin receptor inhibitor dekat orang yang ada depression? Apa theoretical basis of it?
sebab banyak serotonin.
Banyak.
Low serotonin.
Kita nak
Low.
increase serotonin.
Serotonin receptor inhibitor, dia punya konsep dia adalah untuk block the receptor so that dia tak reuptake, dia tak ambil balik. Okay, you ada neuron. So bila neurotransmitter pass one neuron, dia go to another neuron. So dekat pre-synapse, kalau you ingatlah you punya BMS, kalau ilmu you berkat, dekat pre-synapse tu, dia ada reuptake receptor. Reuptake ni maksudnya dia ambil balik semula. Dah lepas, dia pergi balik. Dah lepas, dia pergi balik. So receptor ni lah yang akan menghabiskan serotonin yang available dekat synapse. Okay. So receptor inhibitor, which is the medication that we give in antidepressant, aims at blocking this reuptake receptor so that lebih banyak serotonin available in the synapse. Okay, sebab theory of depression is reduce in serotonin. So kita nak block the reuptake receptor so that serotonin increase. Okay, cumanya the process untuk block semua receptor yang ada tu, semua reuptake receptor yang ada tu is taking that long. Maksudnya dia ambil masa. So the process itself tu is mungkin slow ataupun mengambil masa. We don't really know on molecular level, tapi dia ambil masa. So resulting in the duration it takes untuk normalize again the receptor available tu may take up to 1 or 2 weeks. So in between, kalau patients in between before the antidepressant acts on the patient, kita bagi symptomatic control. And so itu yang kita bagi, certain patient kita bagi benzodiazepine, certain patient kita bagi zolpidem, certain patient kita bagi antipsychotic. So depends on patients punya condition. Kalau dia tak severe, then maybe we can just wait. Okay, tapi kalau dia dah up to severe suicidal, we cannot wait. We need to give something yang quicker. And sebab tu sometimes ada patient yang kita go straight to ECT instead of waiting for medication, especially kalau patient tu highly suicidal, tak makan, tak minum, catatonic for example. Takkan you nak tunggu 2 weeks, by then patient dah buat macam-macam benda yang berbahaya. Okay, so that's some of the concept behind kita punya treatment lah. Alright, last questions if there's any. Kalau tak ada, kita stop there.
Doktor nak tanya pasal dysthymia.
Aha.
Kita ada maintenance phase ke?
Dysthymia ni biasanya dia maintaining on dysthymic stage.
So dia sentiasa kena macam lifelong treatment lah.
Betul. Bukan macam ni. Dysthymia ni kita tengok certain patient dia sits on dysthymia sebab dysthymia ni dia tak disturb function sangat. Dia just rasa low, tak rasa happy, tapi dia still boleh fokus, boleh kerja, boleh tidur. So this kind of patients normally kita tak treat dia actively. Ramai je out there, mungkin ada 1-2% yang on dysthymic tapi dia tak come to psychiatry pun. And so maybe partly personality, dia maybe jenis yang tak campur orang, duduk saja, duduk buat aktiviti dia saja, dia tak disturb others, dia tak suicidal and doesn't require treatment. Tapi ada setengah tu at some point ada trigger, dia jadi depressed, masa tu kita treat lah. And so treatment dia tu really based on apa condition dia, how bad the condition. Okay, alright. We stop there. So nanti saya bagi soalan. Saya bagi soalan through my group. So you have few days untuk work out the answer. So try to answer all the questions so that masa kita discuss on Friday tu we can focus on discussion sahajalah. Mana you boleh share your answer so that we can discuss betul ke salah je lah. Alright, selalunya saya buat group work. Tapi sebab you all duduk kat rumah masing-masing kan. Payahlah pula nak buat group work. Alright, okay, thank you all.